Why have Arsenal made a proposal for Christian Norgaard of Brentford? That is the question some people are asking this morning. There's a lot of anger amongst some of the fan base about this news that came out from David Ornstein. We got the bomber, it followed. Here we go for Kepa Arrizabalaga, and I think that is part of what is frustrating some of the fans. But I'm going to explain in this video why I think Arsenal are targeting Norgaard, why I think it makes sense, and why people need to look at this signing from a slightly different angle to the angle that they're looking at it from. But before we get into that, if I could ask you to subscribe, we're on the way to 20,000 subscribers. We're probably going to go live later on this afternoon as well, so turn your notifications on for that. And if you could click the like button, I would be incredibly grateful. But look, let's get into Norgaard. Let's get into the situation that has come out this morning. So we got the bomber. Arsenal exploring a deal to sign Christian Norgaard from Brentford. Arsenal's proposal for the 31-year-old midfielder is around 11 million euros, and we are awaiting Brentford's reply. Denmark international contracted until June 2027, but is keen among options amid potential Thomas Partey exit. Now, we also heard from Fabrizio Romano, of course. Arsenal submitted proposal worth 11 million euros for Norgaard, as Mads Wethlast had reported. And that was the original source. It came out of Denmark itself. People were questioning that at the time until Ornstein dropped the bomber. Negotiations ongoing as Brentford want more and talks continue. Norgaard wants to join Arsenal. And look, sometimes you can read a bit too much into that. People buy into the whole, a player wants a club. Christian Norgaard enjoys living in London and has the opportunity to move to a team that's going to compete for titles. That is, it's reasonable to expect that he would want to join Arsenal. But look, I want to talk about, firstly, where I think people are going a bit wrong with this morning. And I did it myself straight off the bat, is because Thomas Partey is still at the club, and we're discussing whether or not Thomas Partey will stay at the club, when you hear that Arsenal have bid for Norgaard, your instant reaction is, okay, so we're going to replace Partey with Norgaard. But that's not really the case. Like, the reality is, Zubimendi is replacing Thomas Partey. Norgaard would be replacing Jorginho. And as two individual bits of business, I think that is very, very good. 11 million euros for Norgaard, you're talking just over £9 million. As a replacement for Jorginho, I really do quite like that business. If you compare it to Partey, there are big differences there, but it's a false equivalence. And so that's the first thing I think. You need to look at this through the gaze of replacing Jorginho with Norgaard. And at that point, I think it looks good. I do think it looks good. I think it looks reasonable. Now, why Norgaard? Why not certain other players we've been linked to? Lucien Agume. I spoke yesterday with FK of Latte Firm about Andre Santos as a potential option. Norgaard is very different to them, mainly because of his age and experience. But in terms of him, he's 31 years old, turned 31 in March. So, of course, that is 2.5 years younger than Jorginho. Right-footed, 6'2", something like that. And has a market value, apparently, of £19 million. Of course, a wealth of experience for Brentford and for Denmark. Last season, actually his best season in terms of output, 6 goals, 4 assists for Brentford. And you can see over the last 4 seasons that he has been a staple of that Brentford team. And he is also their captain. So you're talking about a player here who has significant Premier League experience, is a leader at Brentford, plenty of experience playing for the Danish national team as well. And in that sense, I think this is reasonable. Again, when you're talking about replacing Jorginho and that experience, if you are looking to bring someone in that is Premier League proven, I think Norgaard ticks those boxes. Now, if we dig into his stats, of course, we love to see a little bit of greenery. This is Norgaard compared to other midfielders in the Premier League last season per 90 stats. And he's a goal scorer. He's a box crasher. He's an aerial threat from set pieces, which, of course, is something that we love to thrive on. And, the output from him last season was his best in a Brentford shirt, which is fantastic. I was then looking at this. Don't worry that you can't see the actual stats right now if it's a bit too small for you. But this is comparing Christian Norgaard to other midfielders in the big 5 European leagues. These are the percentiles. So the line that's down the middle is the average. And of course, you want the stats to be to the right-hand side of that average where possible. And this is for midfielders that played over 1,600 minutes. So this is, midfielders that play regularly. And if you look into those, these to start with are the defending metrics, and he is pretty much above average in all of them, significantly above average, actually, for a large number of them. Tackles one in the defensive third, midfield third, only tackles in the attacking third is he below the average, and that is because he is a deeper player for Brentford than obviously some more attacking eights, and that would presumably be his role at Arsenal. Dribbles challenges 1, aerial duels 1, ball recoveries, interceptions, clearances, shots blocked, passes blocked, fouls committed. I mean, he is an absolute workhorse in midfield, and I do understand people have a bit of a reservation at this point for that type of player. Like, how many more duel winners, physical players do we need? But I do rate Christian Norgaard's ability to cover ground in that sense. Again, I've said previously, I worry about the lack of legwork that we have in midfield beyond Declan Rice. And I think Christian Norgaard definitely provides some of that. So he's a warrior. If we look at his passing, this is where he is slightly below average for a lot of them. Passes received, total passes, pass completion, short passes completed, medium passes completed, he is above average. Long passes completed, switches, dead ball passes. But you have to put this into the perspective of Brentford and the way that Brentford play. Brentford don't complete huge numbers of passes in build-up. You know, they are much more direct when they're going forwards. They are a transitional team. They look to feed it into Mbuemo, Visser, Schade. And so you can expect that his passing won't feature that highly relative to many midfielders across Europe. But progressive passes and passes into the attacking third, he is above average. And again, that feeds into that rapid transitional play that Brentford play. And if that is something that we're looking to do more of next season, then that is pretty good. Through balls, not so much. Carries and progressive carries, not at all. He's not a carrier of the ball because he wants to get it out of his feet quickly. I don't think that's a bad thing. Carry distance and fouls drawn is not too important. We then look into creativity, progressive passes received, take-ons below average, take-on success above average, though. So he doesn't like to do it. He doesn't like to take players on, but he can do it. Crosses, passes into the penalty area is above average, decent. Assists, above average as well. And then in terms of shooting, shots on target, shot accuracy, goals, expected XG, expected non-penalty XG, all of those that we saw on the greenery check before. Oh, what a voice crack. He is above average as well. So that's kind of an overview of the stats, gives you a bit of an understanding as to the type of player he is. But like I said, I do feel like you have to put that into the context of the way that Brentford play relative to the way that Arsenal play. I then saw this from The Athletic. Progressive passing defensive midfielders. Big 5 European League midfielders with over 900 minutes played. And they have this destroying ability metric. That is down on the bottom axis. What the destroying ability is, I'm not entirely sure. And on the left axis, it is progressive passing, distance, and touches. And if we zoom in on that, Christian Norgaard ranks really highly. This is, if we go back to it, this is the right-hand side there, which is what you want to be looking at. And he is up there really alongside Martin Zubimendi. Very interestingly, there's Lucien Agume, there is Andre Santos, the two other players that we spoke about. Casemiro, actually, well out there. But you can tell from these numbers that his progressive passing is good. Again, though, you do have to factor that into the way that he plays at Brentford and the speed at which they look to move the ball forwards. Into some elements, other elements of Norgaard that people will be interested in. His injury history. Now, of course, if you're comparing this to Jorginho wasn't a player that got injured that often at all. If you're comparing it to Thomas Partey, he's a player that did. Over the last 5 years, Norgaard has picked up 6 injuries in total. 2 of those, the only 2 really significant ones were ankle injuries, and they were 5 years ago. Since then, a foot injury that kept him out for a month, a back injury just over a month, an unknown injury, and a head injury. And actually, if you look at those, you know, they are they're war wounds. You know, they are impact injuries based on the way that he plays. And you might remember from last season that tackle that he made on Martin. I call it a tackle. It was a physical assault on Martinelli last season. That is the type of player that he is. He's very aggressive. He's very combative. He will pick up yellow cards and probably red cards along the way. But I don't mind that. I don't mind having a warrior in midfield. And then you look at the current contract that he's on now, according to Capology, who are a bit hit and miss, you've got to be careful with it. But according to them, he is currently on £40,000 per week with an expiration in June 2027. Now, 40 grand a week, I have to say, you can double that, put him on 80 grand a week. That is still not bad at all. And if you compare it to Thomas Partey, and I know I said not to compare it to Partey in the sense of who he'd been replacing, but Thomas Partey is currently on £200,000 a week and he wants more in order to stay. I can understand the club looking at moving Thomas Partey on, not negotiating for more than 200 grand a week, and bringing in Christian Norgaard, who's a year younger than Thomas Partey with a cleaner injury history and would be on significantly lower wages. And so, look, ultimately, I like this. I can understand people's frustration, but you've got to stop getting angry at the order we are making signings in. And this was the same with, we've signed Kepa. We got the here we go for Kepa today. You have to understand the order in which you sign players does not matter. Does Kepa address a problem that we needed to address? Absolutely. Does Norgaard, if we're not keeping Thomas Partey, address a problem that we need to address? Absolutely. Has Zubimendi addressed the problem that we needed to address? Absolutely. Now, of course, we have to get the striker and left winger done. We all agree on that. But it doesn't matter if that happens in 2 weeks' time. It doesn't matter that Norgaard has happened first. Like, the order of it is irrelevant as long as you get the signings done in time for the start of next season when it comes to the striker and left winger. And I struggle to understand why people are getting angry. Okay, maybe you say the PTSD of last summer, because last summer, when we got Calafiori and Marino done, people did say, yeah, we need to get the striker, but hold on. I get that, but there's no point getting angry and burning energy. I mean, people are attacking me for saying I think it's a good bit of business for just over 9 million quid to get Norgaard, who is heavily underrated. Don't get angry yet. If we don't sign those players, if we don't sign a striker, which I just can't see happening, then get angry. But getting angry now is just pointless. It is a complete waste of energy. You're getting angry about something that hasn't happened yet, might not happen, and if it doesn't happen, you've got no control over it anyway. So relax. It's a piece of business that works for us. It makes sense. I would argue that Lucien Agume or Andre Santos would be better for the long term in terms of being younger. But if you're just looking at having someone come in next season that's got the experience, that's got the maturity, that's tried and tested in the Premier League, that is going to be able to step into games when Rice or Zubimendi need a rest, I think Norgaard ticks a lot of those boxes. And like I say, for the price, I really don't think you can complain. So moving forwards, you've actually solved a lot of issues. We really can focus then on the striker and the left winger. Like, that is kind of all that is left to focus on. It'd be interesting to see if this deal then impacts the deal for Jorel Hato. I think if you've replaced Partey and Jorginho with Zubimendi and Norgaard, then you're probably going to have to move on Kivior and Zinchenko for Hato to make sense. Because, again, you're not looking now at moving Miles Lewis-Skelly into midfield necessarily. So we'll wait and see what happens with that. But look, let me know in the comments. Are you happy with this? Do I make sense here? Or am I wrong? Am I being unambitious? Am I being a shill for the Cronkies? I don't think I am, but I know some people like to have that opinion. I can assure you I am not currently receiving brown envelopes, much as I wish I was, because the rent always needs paying. Anyway, look, that is going to be the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you could subscribe, if you could click that like button, keep an eye out for a live stream later on. And other than that, enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Enjoy the rest of your week. And I will catch you on the next one. Until then, goodbye.